Have you ever noticed how strange this feels? The day seems ordinary. No heroic effort, no stones carried, no marathon run, no world saved. And yet, in the evening, you sit there feeling exhausted, as if something inside you has been slowly and carefully drained. Not sharp, not physical, but dull, heavy, internal. And the most unsettling part is that you can't really explain where it came from. There wasn't that much to do. In moments like this, Jung would suggest looking not at how much you did, but at what was happening inside you. Because exhaustion is not always a consequence of work. Sometimes it's the result of living under constant tension, a tension we've grown so accustomed to that we no longer notice it. We adapt so fully to background pressure that it starts to feel normal. Imagine that there's a radio playing inside you all the time. It's not blaring loudly, but it never turns off. Thoughts, images, expectations, anxieties, comparisons, inner dialogues, doubts, the constant urge to control things. You get used to it. You assume that if you're not physically active, you're not spending energy. But your psyche never stops working, and it consumes energy no less than your body does. Jung said that modern humans live in a state of chronic mental overload. We are always processing something, even when we believe we are resting. We scroll, read, watch, listen. On the outside, it looks like relaxation, but inside there is even more stimulation. The brain never truly pauses, and without pauses, it cannot recover. That's where the strange effect appears. You didn't really do anything heavy, yet it feels as if you were on guard all day long. Because you were. You were constantly ready to respond, to messages, to news, to other people's emotions, to expectations. You live in a mild but uninterrupted state of tension. It often goes unnoticed, and precisely for that reason, it drains you. Jung called this exhaustion through misalignment, a state in which the way we live no longer matches how we are internally structured. Externally, you might look successful, active, normal. Internally, it feels like you are constantly playing a role, even if that role seems acceptable, even if you chose it yourself. Every role requires energy. Maintaining an image, meeting expectations, being composed, appropriate, positive, all of this is work. And the fewer moments you have in life where you can simply be, without explaining yourself or adapting, the deeper the fatigue becomes. The most deceptive part is that this kind of exhaustion is not cured by ordinary rest. Sleep restores the body, but not always the psyche. A day off reduces schedule pressure, but it doesn't quiet the inner noise. That's why you can sleep well, lie around, do nothing, and still feel empty. Jung would say that in such moments, the psyche is sending a signal, not of laziness, not of weakness, but of overload, of being exposed to too many stimuli, meanings, demands for too long. And if that signal is ignored, exhaustion begins to transform into apathy, irritability, and a loss of interest in things that once mattered. There is one essential thing to understand. You are not tired because something is wrong with you. You are tired because you are living in a mode that demands more internal energy than you are able to replenish. And while we believe that rest means simply doing nothing, we miss the essential point. The psyche needs more than rest. It needs silence. Most often we call this exhaustion laziness. You don't want to get up, you don't want to start, you don't want to respond, you don't even want to rest correctly. And immediately, an accusing inner voice appears. Pull yourself together. You're just lazy. Others have more to do, and they manage. But Jung suggested not rushing to conclusions in these states. Because laziness and exhaustion are different things, even though they look similar from the outside. Laziness is when energy is available, but there's no desire to use it. Exhaustion is when the desire may still exist, but the energy is already gone. And this subtle difference often goes unnoticed. Emotional exhaustion almost always hides. It rarely arrives with a clear label saying, "I'm tired." More often it shows up as irritation over small things, indifference to what once mattered, the urge to postpone everything, or a strange desire to simply disappear, not to die, not to escape forever, just to disappear for a while, so no one expects anything, asks anything, needs anything. Jung said, "This is how the psyche protects itself. It's not weakness or immaturity. It's an attempt to reduce the flow of stimulation when it becomes overwhelming. When the external world presses too hard, the psyche looks for ways to limit contact. The simplest way is emotional withdrawal, lowering interest, disengaging, slipping into apathy. The problem is that modern life rarely allows this. We live in a culture of constant availability. We must stay connected, respond, perform. And instead of listening to exhaustion, we fight it, pushing ourselves, shaming ourselves, demanding more. But the psyche is not an engine. You cannot restart it through willpower alone. When its signals are ignored for too long, it speaks louder. First through fatigue, then through anxiety, then through a loss of meaning. Eventually, a person asks, "Why do I want nothing, even though everything seems fine?" Jung would reply that fine is a deceptive word. Often it means acceptable rather than right for you. You can live a socially correct life and still slowly drain yourself, simply because that life leaves no room for inner silence. The desire to disappear for a while is not about death or irresponsibility. It is the desire to stop being an object of expectations, to stop being a function, to stop being a screen onto which everything is projected. It is the wish to return, briefly, to a state where you owe nothing to anyone. And when you look at this honestly, it becomes clear why ordinary rest doesn't help. Even while resting, we remain accessible. We keep consuming information, comparing ourselves to others, replaying the past, worrying about the future. The body is lying down. The psyche is still at work. Jung emphasized that humans need spaces where they can exist without evaluation, where they don't have to be interesting, useful, productive. Without such spaces, exhaustion becomes chronic. It stops being a signal and becomes the background of life. The key is to see exhaustion not as an enemy, but as a message. It says, "You are not weak. You have been strong for too long. You are not lazy. You are overloaded." As long as we fail to distinguish between these, we keep fighting ourselves where we should actually pause and listen. Jung spoke subtly about overstimulation. It is almost invisible because it has become the normal setting of our lives. We wake up and immediately enter a stream: news, messages, notifications, opinions, images, sounds. Even if you don't seek it out, information finds you, and the psyche cannot truly ignore it. Every stimulus is a small intrusion. It demands reaction, even minimal, noticing, evaluating, comparing. When there are hundreds a day, the nervous system never rests. Gradually, contact with oneself weakens. Not suddenly, but slowly. Feelings become harder to hear because they are quiet, and they require pauses. Pauses no longer exist. At some point, a flat emptiness appears. Not dramatic, not desperate. Just a sense that everything feels the same. Joy dulls. Interest becomes shallow. This isn't brokenness. It's conservation. The psyche reduces sensitivity because full intensity would be unbearable. Jung believed that humans are not designed for endless streams of impressions. Our psyche evolved in a world of pauses, slowness, repetition. Without this, the inner space fills with noise. The more stimuli there are, the less you feel. The more information, the less meaning. Meaning does not arise from quantity. It arises from depth. And depth requires silence. That is why a day of doing nothing with your phone leaves you drained. Not because you are weak, but because you are in contact with thousands of fragments of other people's lives, each leaving a small trace. Jung would say that exhaustion in such moments is the psyche's attempt to close the gate, to reduce input. But if a person continues forcing constant engagement, the psyche begins shutting down on its own, through apathy, drowsiness, scattered attention. Then comes the feeling that you have changed, that you used to feel more alive. And that's true. You were more alive because you had more inner space. The problem is not stimulation itself, but its quantity and continuity. The psyche needs rhythm, tension and release, engagement and withdrawal. Without balance, exhaustion sets in, even when life appears calm from the outside. Perhaps the hardest thing is allowing silence not as a rare luxury, but as a necessity. Without it, you slowly lose the ability to hear what you truly want. And without contact with your own desires, even the simplest activity becomes draining. When we talk about restoring energy, the first impulse is effort, to gather yourself, to push harder, to optimize rest. Jung opposed this approach because it turns exhaustion into a task, and a task is already tension. An exhausted psyche does not need another plan. It needs reconnection with yourself, with your pace, with your genuine reactions. Energy drains not only from action, but from constantly ignoring yourself. We often live as if there is no one inside us. There is a schedule, goals, roles, but little sense of being alive. To restore energy, we don't need acceleration. We need slowing down, enough to notice what is actually happening inside. Jung emphasized that the psyche recovers not when we fill emptiness, but when we allow it to exist, when we stop escaping silence. Because only in emptiness does the inner voice become audible. At first, silence can feel uncomfortable, even anxious. We are unused to the absence of stimulation. But if we don't flee, a sense of grounding slowly emerges, as if we are finally returning to ourselves. Do not expect immediate results. This is not 10 minutes of silence leading to instant vitality. It is a gradual return of sensitivity, and sensitivity recovers slowly. Sometimes recovery begins with simple permissions, to be slow, to not reply immediately, to pause before reacting. Pause is the key word. In pause, the psyche exhales. In pause, you stop being a function and become human again. This is not selfishness. It is a return to life. Because living without contact with yourself is also a withdrawal, just a subtle one. Jung believed that humans cannot live constantly in the outer world. They require time in the inner one. When that time is missing, the psyche demands it through fatigue, apathy, loss of meaning. The task is not to fight these states, but to understand them. Ask not, how do I become productive again? But, where did I stop listening to myself? Not, what is wrong with me? But, what have I been tolerating for too long? Energy returns not when you become stronger, but when you stop violating yourself. When you allow yourself to be alive instead of merely effective. When you orient not only toward external demands, but toward internal signals. Perhaps the most important realization is this: you are not required to always be in a resourceful state. Fatigue is part of life, but chronic fatigue is a sign that something in the rhythm is broken. There is a simple distinction. Healthy fatigue feels like completion. You did something, spent energy, and now you rest. There is warmth in it. Exhaustion feels different. There is no end point. You are tired before you begin. The thought of action feels heavy, and rest does not restore it. Jung believed exhaustion arises when a person lives too long outside their own life, not necessarily hating their work, but constantly adapting, smoothing edges, suppressing impulses because that's how it's done. The psyche can tolerate this only for a time. Eventually, it tires not of tasks, but of constant self-restraint, of being someone else. Living in alignment with yourself does not mean a life without effort. It means your efforts are not directed against you, that there are moments when you are not playing a role. Jung emphasized that humans need contact with inner truth, not polished, not ideal, but real. And it is this contact that restores energy. Exhaustion intensifies where we deceive ourselves, where we say, "I'm fine," when we're not, where we smile while feeling empty, where we continue because it's expected, although resonance is long gone. No drastic solutions are required. This is not about abandoning everything. It is about honesty in small things, noticing where you overstrain yourself, where you agree while internally shrinking, where you ignore fatigue because it feels shameful to be weak. To live in dialogue with yourself means asking not only "what should I do," but "how do I feel right now?" Not to immediately change everything, but to remain connected. When that connection exists, fatigue becomes understandable. It comes and goes. Without connection, it becomes endless and vague. Jung believed that the psyche always strives for wholeness. Its signals are not meant to break us, but to bring us back. If you are constantly tired, it may not be about workload. It may be about living too long without pauses, without silence, without yourself. And this is not your fault. Connection with yourself can be restored slowly, gently, without pressure. Not through another must, but through permission. Permission to be tired, to not want, to slow down. And it is precisely there that the psyche exhales and energy returns, not as a flash, but as a quiet, stable sense that you are once again in your place. Thank you for watching. I hope this gave you something to reflect on. Until next time.